Good afternoon and welcome to Wednesday's Celtic State of Mind Bulletin. I'm Chris McElwain and I'm delighted to be joined today by Patrick McGill. It is Wednesday, and as it's Wednesday, I know there's a big expectation that not only would you have Paul John Dykes here, but you'd also have Big John Yogi Hughes. Now, Mr. Dykes is taking some much needed R&R, which in Acsom terms means that he's actually working on the next evolution of the Acsom product and probably coming up with some new projects. So he's shoved me in the hot seat yesterday and today, and going forward this week, you'll have the dulcet tones of Kevin Graham to host. So you get rid of me, which I'm sure a lot of you will be grateful for. And unfortunately, Big Yogi has messaged the manager and has declared himself injured for this, for this match. No, the big man's feeling a little bit under the weather, and obviously, Patrick, I'm sure you and me and all the Acsom team hope he recovers soon. He did say that if he felt better, he would come on and join us, but he also said that there could be a risk of, let's just say, an eruption coming from one end or the other, which we don't like, an Acsom exclusive. So, John, sorry for sharing that with the public, but I really do hope you're getting better soon, mate, and we'll look forward to seeing you hopefully next week. As we said yesterday, we're in that point of the season or mid-season, pre-season, not mid-season, pre-season, where there really isn't the type of movement that we want to see. We're all hanging our hearts on when's the next signing going to come? Are we going to see a goalkeeper? Are we seeing movement in recruitment? Everything's a little bit quiet here, but what we are trying to do is look at some of the potentials. We're looking at the game tonight against Queen's Park, where hopefully we might see again some more of the youngsters coming in. We might see some of the first team players who are back in training. We want to talk a little bit about Nicholas Kuhn, who's been in the news this week. He's been talking to doing the official Celtic presser. He's been talking about what he wants to achieve this season. He also mentions friendship with Bernardo, so we'll touch on that. And some of the Celtics who are still in tournament football were actually until last night. So Alistair Johnson impressing for Canada despite going out of the tournament 2-0 to Argentina. But if you're going to go out, Patrick, then losing to Lionel Messi's Argentina is the way to do it, right? So anyway, so Patrick McGill, welcome to the show. How are you doing, sir?
Not bad. It's been a good week. Still no signings, but it looks as if certainly Adamida is getting a bit closer. There was rumours about Bernardo earlier in the week. I don't know how accurate those were, but you'd like to think those two should be fairly straightforward. I mean, if both players want to come back and you're able to agree a reasonable fee, it's just contract stuff after that. So you would like to hope that we'll get them in soon. I don't know when we plan on flying out to America, but the first game, I think, is just after midnight on the 21st of July. So, maybe a week away we fly out. So to get at least one, maybe two bodies in the door before then, I think would be quite good. Brendan, after their United game, promised a goalkeeper before the Kilmarnock game. So hopefully we can hold him in the club to that promise. I think that's maybe 3-4 weeks away, that game. So still got a bit of time. Hopefully we can get that one over the line. But it should be interesting next Wednesday if and when Yogi's back. He'll have not been on for 3 weeks, and if we've not made a signing by then, it could be an all-time classic Yogi rant. So
I think
that
you and Paul John, just
we'll have to try and contain him.
Just sit back and let him go for an hour, and I'm sure he probably
give him his 60 minutes. I know. Oh, that'll be a classic. But no, I mean, I'm glad that Celtic are back. We've had that friendly on Friday night. Got another one tonight. They seem to clash with big Euros games, which has been annoying so far. So I've sort of had to split my time. But I think by the time we get to the States, that'll be the 21st. So Euros will be well over and can enjoy us. I think it's DC United is the first game I want to say. So yeah, I mean, Man City and Chelsea, that'll be a test. But it's all about fitness at this stage. And as you say, tonight, guys like Bosun Lawal, guys like the youngsters, guys coming back from the Euros, try and get 45 minutes on the legs and prepare ourselves for the 4th of August.
Yeah, absolutely. And look, I know we could term some of those games in the US glamour-tised, but I think the pressure is on and the expectation is on from the Celtic fan base because we want to see signings, right? We want to see a glimpse of new players that are going to come in and make that impact during the season. I mean, you mentioned the goalkeeper there. I discussed it with the guys yesterday. The one that seems to be getting the most traction at the moment is this Peter Vindal Jensen, who, if rumours to believed, has an asking price for somewhere around the £8 million mark. Now, £8 million relative terms to world football, and particularly in the bigger leagues, doesn't seem like a huge amount of money. But when it comes to Celtic's spend over the last couple of years, that's at the higher end of what we would pay for a player. But it's such a key position, Patrick, that is that the kind of level you think that we should be targeting for a goalkeeper, around that £8 million to £10 million mark? Is that, would you see that as the right kind of statement for the club to make and really appease some of the fears around the fan base?
Yeah, I think we can't be afraid of spending that money, is probably what I would say. It's arguably the most important position in the pitch, really. I mean, if you look back in the past, you've had guys like Barkas. You had Shane Duffy, an aging Scott Brown, an unsettled defence, a one-off season, but Barkas undoubtedly he didn't fill the defenders with confidence. And you've seen in the past, having poor goalies can cost you. I think we would all agree if we had a slightly better goalkeeper, we could have won that game in Seville 21 years ago. So having a good goalkeeper, as we've seen with Fraser Forster, Joe Hart, Arthur Bovic, it's the difference between winning and losing games sometimes, and that's at the very highest level.
Yeah.
So I was just looking there. He's played a full season for AZ in the past. He's played a full season for Sparta Prague. He's a relatively young goalkeeper. He's 26. So, if we're spending that money and he ends up being a good player, you can either have him for a long time or you can cash in 2-3 years and make profit, which is a perfect signing for us. So as long as we think he's a good enough goalkeeper, I think it's a no-brainer. Obviously, 8 million, it would be our second largest ever transfer, just behind Odson Edward by £1 million. But if he is of enough quality, I don't see any reason why we shouldn't sign him. Coming from that league, I don't think wages would be a problem. I personally don't think that the 8 million should be a problem. We've got money in the bank. We're a Champions League team. It's our number one priority position. So it just depends on how good a goalkeeper he is, really, would be my only stumbling block. So if he's the man, I would spend the money.
Yeah, I think it's a great point. And look, we know that that's a big outlay for us, given what we've spent previously. But I think the way you have to look at it is that position, that goalkeeping position. It's a position that if we get the right player in week in, week out, largely injury aside. So I think it's a position that we can't really afford to go in with too much of a low ball offer. If we think we've got the right man targeted. Now, I have no idea if that's Jensen. I know that there's been some motions from Sparta Prague to say he's not for sale, could be a tactic to put the price up, or it could just be that they really want to keep the player. But I think you're right. I think if there's a price set around that £8 to £10 million barrier, if he's a player that the manager wants and the manager singled out, and we do hope that Brendan is the one setting the requirements now for players. So obviously he's got his recruitment team there who are, large parts of it are still in place despite some of the changes last season. But you would hope that if he's a player that's been identified by the manager said, that's the guy I want, we have the financial capability and clout to go to that level for a player. Yes, there's an element of risk around it. We saw that with Barkas. We paid big money for what we thought was going to be a proven and established player. Didn't really work out. There's always that element of risk with any player that comes in. So it'll be interesting to see whether Jensen or one of the other numerous targets that we've been linked with, and probably will continue to be linked with until we actually make that announcement. Let us know what you think in the comments. What you think of Jensen? If you think he's the kind of player we should be targeting, is that the budget or the price level that we should be looking at? Are there any other targets out there that you would suggest that we should be looking at? And we'll look to bring them into the discussion. I'll bring up a couple of comments at the moment. I want to not break with tradition. I'm going to bring Jungle Lion up first of all. Mr. Dyke's on holiday. I'm telling you, Jungle, that man does not take a holiday. I've spoken to Paul John more times this week than I do normally. He is very much involved in Acsom business at the moment, but he is doing well, and he will be back next week. It's today Yogi Junior Day. Normally, as we said, it is Magnet, but Big Yogi is feeling a little bit under the weather. But I've no doubt, as Patrick rightly said, next Wednesday we'll have Big John back, and he'll probably just go on one of those famous Yogi rants from start to finish, particularly if we don't have any signings. And Patrick, could you imagine? And Paddy, who's never never disappoints with his comments. Jungle, I'm of the opinion that Double Denim has him handcuffed to the radiators. He wants a job full time. Trust me, if you guys knew the stress and the pressure I'm under at the moment, I can guarantee you that once Kev takes over tomorrow, I'm going to go on holiday. Never mind Paul Jones. So yeah, no, Paul Jones, as I say, I think he's at home working on projects. I don't know. He doesn't tell us what he's doing. He just keeps it all very close to his chest. Now, this one probably represents more of what the fans are feeling at the moment. Stephen Dolly. Another day bites the dust, still no new faces. They will hit us with Ida and Bernardo before the start of the season and think that will keep them happy. No progression from last season. Now, this is something we discussed yesterday, Patrick, in that what would constitute the bare minimum that we'd want to see by the time that first game rolls around. Now, I think goalkeeper is paramount, right? I don't think there's any way we can go to the first game of the season with Scott Bain in goal. Benji Siegrist, I don't think is even in the picture. So we need to get the goalkeeping position sorted, and we've spoken about that. Ida and Bernardo looked at the outset of the recruitment window as the obvious ones we were going to sign. You know, they both contributed in meaningful ways last season. Helped us to a double. I think, as Jim Orr says, you don't have Ida, no double, based on his goal. And obviously, Bernardo played his part in that alongside some other pretty good performances. So it seemed like no-brainers that we'd get these players in. Obviously, the challenge we've had with Ida was no transfer fee agreed in terms of loan to buy. So it's a case of we have to go in there and meet Norwich's valuation if we feel the player's worth it. But he does seem to be a player that Brendan Rodgers wants. With Bernardo, it's, I guess, in one sense, a lower risk signing because we know what he can bring to the table. There's some dubiety about, is he the type of player to come in and, say, replace Matt O'Reilly if Matt O'Reilly goes, who again has been linked to Atletico Madrid. If he was to leave, irrespective of a transfer fee, I don't know if there's a consensus that he would be the man to step into O'Reilly's shoes. Rather, I think he comes in the same status or position that he did last season as a strong squad player, maybe a player who is going to develop into a first team player, but I wouldn't see him as necessarily that O'Reilly replacement. But for you, Patrick, if we were to get those two players in and a goalkeeper, let's say by the time we head off to the US, and with the assumption that there's still business to be done, would that be enough to kind of say, okay, I'm relaxed, I trust the club, I trust the manager, I feel like we're moving in the right direction? Or does it give you that nervousness that maybe that's enough to go into the first game of the season?
No, I think that would give me confidence. That would give me great confidence. To go from now until America, I mean, that is only 10 days, that 10 and a half days until that friendly. So if you can get 3 players over the line, assuming it is those 2 loan players coming back and it's a good goalkeeper, because if we sign a crap goalkeeper, then, what's the point? But, as long as it's those 3 players and are good players, that would be great business over the next 10 days. Personally, going into Kilmarnock, I've got no real doubts about winning that game. It's just a sort of marker to say, right, this is the beginning of the season. You've known this is the time that you need to prepare for, and you've not got X number of targets. So I've got no real worries about winning that game against Kilmarnock, but it is just sort of that marker. But to get those 3 in for the America tour, I think that would be great business. In terms of who else you need to get in, as much as you're sort of Bernardo's sort of coming back and O'Reilly's going, I think with the O'Reilly situation, you're sort of in the same place as Jota and Tierney, where a great player is leaving on a big fee and you're wanting a like-for-like replacement because of how much money you're getting. But realistically, I don't think Celtic can go out and buy those types of players. I think you need to buy someone like Bernardo, and then in 18 months, 2 years' time, they become an O'Reilly and they begin to play at that level. O'Reilly, he scored, just shy of 20 goals. He gets 3 assists in the Champions League. He's a fantastic press with the ball. He's got a great pass. He's still a young player, tall, physical. So yeah, I think Celtic would struggle to go out and buy someone like that. I think Bernardo is a good signing to replace that sort of place in the midfield. And then again, you're sort of, I'm sure we'll come on to talk about Daniel Kelly. If we're going to keep a hold of him, it'll be a new contract and minutes. So you're going to have to play Daniel Kelly, which I thought he's done really well in the second half of the season, in fairness. Yep. Lawal is getting rave reviews down at Fleetwood. Thought he'd done really well against Ayr United. Another young player, tall, physical. So you would imagine, is going to come into the side. And then you've still got Awata, McGregor, Hatate, who obviously you two first team players there, and then Awata played a lot of minutes as well. So in terms of bodies, I think the midfield's actually fine, despite the fact you're losing sort of one body net. Other positions in the pitch, unless we're going to play, maybe Scales at left back as a backup, or Montgomery's going to come in as a backup, we might need another left back. I think we need a right winger. Kuhn, Yang, Forrest, they're all sort of there. They've all been in and out the team. Certainly Forrest is getting older, and Yang and Kuhn they've been okay, but they've had poor performances, several poor performances. So I think we could look to strengthen in the right wing area. But to get those three bodies in, as you say, if we get that over the line, I'd like to think we'll certainly get Ida over the line before America. But if we manage to get all three, I think that would be fantastic business over the next 10, 11 days.
Absolutely, yeah. I think it would be. I think it would at least alleviate some of the concerns. It definitely wouldn't alleviate all the concerns because, again, as many people have pointed out, it is just reverting back to almost that cup final team and squad by bringing those players in. Obviously, with the inclusion of the goalkeeper, which we must get. And there's no way we can go through this transfer window without having a goalkeeper. And you want a player who should, by all rights, be a leader at the back and help organise that defence. You want a goalkeeper in as early as possible. Allow him to bed in, allow him to get to know his teammates, fit into the structure, understand the manager's expectations on the pitch. So I think that's one that we really should get done early. And part of me thinks there's not really enough of an excuse not to have had some very clear targets in mind, because it's not like Joe Hart announced on the last day of the season he was done. We've known about it for some time, and assuming there's not suddenly been this resurgence of faith in Scott Bain, and Scott Bain's suddenly going to have the best renaissance, that we've ever seen, then I think that I would like to think, without having that insight, that they've had 2 or 3 targets in mind, and it's just been a case of, okay, let's work out the logistics, let's work out, how much we're prepared to spend, and that process is continuing in the background. At least that's what we hope as supporters. Now, you mentioned a couple of things there about the young players, and we do have a game tonight. Celtic are playing Queen's Park after playing Ayr United last week. In terms of the lineup, now we have seen some of our key players, our key first-team players, return to training. I think Maeda, O'Reilly, Hatate, and Palma as well, I think, was pictured at training. We've obviously still got Kyogo is played for the first half in the last game against Ayr. So we've got the opportunity to play some of our first teamers tonight. But looking at the Ayr United game, some of the players we were keen to see, I think Bosun Lawal was probably top of the list because he is somebody that's been out on loan, has impressed at his loan club, albeit as at a level a lot of people point out, it's very low level in terms of the English tier. But I still think it's a reasonable enough level for him to go and impress. And he played consistently. And for me, when I was watching the United game, it was evident that he had had a run of games. He'd really developed over the course of a year from when we saw him in the prior pre-season. And I think it would be great to see him get more minutes tonight and give him an opportunity right through pre-season to determine, is he a player that would benefit again from maybe a further loan at a higher level? Or is he even someone that could maybe come into that first team squad and be in contention, maybe not for a starting berth, but someone who would merit getting minutes throughout the season as part of that, say, that midfield 3, assuming we're going with the same structure. I mean, what would be your view on Bosun Lawal? Can you see more of him, and do you think he's got an opportunity to audition for a first team squad place?
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, the reviews he was getting down at Fleetwood, and I know people, you obviously see Fleetwood, they're a sort of mid-table League One side down in England, but I think it was Notts County, Callum McGregor was at, scored a bunch of goals, performed really well, and I think they were in League One at the time as well, 10 years ago. He comes back in, 10 years ago, he was sort of playing off the striker, I think, down at Notts County, comes in, I think Ronnie started playing him on the wing. He scores all those early goals in the Champions League qualifiers. He's sort of in and out under Ronnie, but under Rodgers' first spell, halfway through Rodgers' first season, he really cements his place, and he's been unmoved for 7.5 years, I think, pretty much always in that starting lineup, and he's obviously dropped back into that sort of dictating the play, sort of not defensive role, but sort of holding role in the midfield. So I'm not saying Lawal is the next Callum McGregor. That would be brilliant, obviously. I think he's certainly a more physical player, taller, but I would quite happily see him come into the side. You're sort of looking at, in my opinion, you're looking at him and Kelly. If Kelly is to stay, I think he's plays a bit further forward, but he's obviously done well. Lawal's done well. You're looking at guys like McGregor, Bernardo, and Hatate. You're probably as the starting three going forward if Bernardo comes in. But you're looking at guys like McGregor. I think McGregor turned 31 this summer. So say you're 3-0 up against Dundee at half time at Parkhead. Bring Lawal on for the second half in place of McGregor. Bring Kelly on for 40 minutes. If these guys are wanting to stick around, we can't compete with the likes of Brighton and Brentford in wages, but we can certainly give players more minutes at a decent level for a young player. We might see this sort of vast gap between us and the rest of the Scottish League, but for a young player, maybe not as physical as the rest of the SPFL, those minutes will be vital in their development. They need to be playing with grown men, with adults, and we obviously need eight homegrown players in the Champions League squad. These young players are going to be part of that. They might even get minutes. You see Mitchell Frame come on for half an hour against Feyenoord in the last Champions League game last year. So there's opportunities there that might not present themselves down south, and we really need to tap into that for the sort of upper echelons of our academy, the guys like Kelly and Lawal. And, obviously he's been on loan. That's another, sort of option for our youth players. But I'd like to see those guys get a lot more minutes, and I can see them. I don't know if Kelly's in training. I only watched parts of that Ayr game. I didn't see him. I'd not watched any of
No,
the training videos either, so I'm not
I'm
sure
not
if he's still
sure.
on his holidays but I'd certainly like to see Lawal play tonight and see those two get minutes throughout the season.
Absolutely, and we also saw during the game, we saw a couple of players who've been certainly maybe on the periphery of the first team squad. I think Home played, Yang O both got some game time. I said at the time when I was talking to Paul John on the match, I thought they fluffed their lines a little bit. I thought there was an opportunity then for those players, kind of more senior pros, to stand out. And I mean, Yang and O, when I mentioned that, I actually think Home in the limited minutes first half was one of the best performers. Good hunger, good running, looked energetic, looked like I've got an opportunity here to demonstrate to the manager that I can make a contribution this year. So I think again, Home I would like to see coming in, as well as Lawal, get some more minutes, see if he can build on that performance. There was a couple of the young boys did well. Dane Murray coming back. I mean, there's a good news story around him coming back from injury, but he looked assured when he came on, which was great. Josh Derry, full of running, energy, looked like he was willing to take his chance as well. So again, could be a player to come in and get some minutes. Maybe not necessarily looking to make a contribution to the first team this year, but making a play to say, look, Gaffer, send me out on loan, give me the chance to go and develop. And I think another one that I pointed out, Lenny Agbayer. Apologies if that's not the right pronunciation, but he was a player that I liked in a very nervous way. He was a player who I think probably encountered everything you can encounter in a match in such a short appearance. Giving away a penalty, getting caught out defensively, making last-ditch tackles, knocking players over with headers, missing headers, galloping forward with the ball. I thought he had everything in a positive sense and everything in a negative sense as well. But at the same time, he was a player I thought, I want to see more of this guy. I want to see more of this player to see how he gets on. So, yeah, it'll be interesting to see what the lineup is tonight. We might see maybe more of the first team coming in to get some minutes ahead of the tour. See some of the youngsters maybe hopefully build on their performance and get that second opportunity. Now, moving on, one of our players who came in the January window, and while there was criticism of that window, I think he was seen as maybe the closest to a statement signing. That was Nicholas Kuhn. He's been talking to Celtic TV and he's been doing the Celtic press this week. But he's spoken about what his expectations are and how he wants to make the step up this season and really cement his place. What did you think of Kuhn when he came in last season? And do you think he's done enough to be seen as our first choice on that right wing, Patrick? Or would you still be looking to see if there's a better player out there at the moment?
Well, I'm sort of caught in two minds here because we've obviously signed a lot of wingers. in the last 12 months. So the chances of his signing, another one or two it's probably pretty slim. But looking at the players we have at our disposal, Palmer looked as if he was going to be Player of the Year up until December, and then after December, totally fell off a cliff. Struggled to get back into the team. Sometimes didn't even make a matchday squad. Yang obviously came in, played really well against Dundee, sent off against Hearts, and he makes that mistake at Ibrox, and he really struggles to get back into the side. I think certainly me and Yogi on here were certainly guilty of it. I think most fans were. We gave Kuhn quite a tough time of it after he first came in. He makes a good start with that goal at Aberdeen, but he was pretty bad. I mean, really, really bad. But obviously, we didn't know he'd. I think he had a few teeth removed, and he lost quite a lot of weight. So he was taken out the team. I think that's when Yang came in, and then I think he came back in against Livingston maybe after an international break, and he looked a lot better. I think he chipped in with a few assists, maybe scored one or two goals. But Forrest comes in towards the end of the season, and purely based on performance, I think you've got to go with James Forrest. I do feel sorry for him in a way because he cancelled his holidays, and he didn't get a single minute at the Euros. So I do feel sorry for James. It's probably his last international tournament unless Scotland qualify for the World Cup. But Chris has disappeared, so I'll keep talking. Yang, Kuhn, Forrest. I think Kuhn is the more obvious one. You've obviously got that. You've paid money for him. He's a decent age. I think he's only 25, 26. Brian, hello. I am now in the hot seat.
Yeah, hot seat.
We're just talking about. We'll talk about first choice right wingers and how we don't have any. Obviously, a lot of UK right wingers lost their job on Thursday night, Friday morning. So we can maybe pick up a few free transfers. But no, I was just saying, I think Forrest probably has to be first choice based on performance and how I felt a wee bit sorry for him after the Euros because he never got a single minute after cancelling all his holidays.
I know what's really interesting is that actually Forrest would still be the best right winger at the club, as we found out towards the end of last season. But how much? I mean, we can't rely on him for a full season, and everyone knows I love Jimmy Forrest. I think he's a real live, living Celtic legend that is still playing. But he's not going to do 40 games this season. So you're going, well, how good is Kuhn going to be? And he did show improvement, Kuhn, and I'd like to see how he is. Physically, if he can broaden out a wee bit, if he can get a bit sort of faster. But I suspect that'll be an area where they'll look to strengthen. And what's crazy to think is, and I hate to go back in time, but it shows how poor the transfer window is that we signed a lot of wingers in Forrest and Maeda are still the best two. And we probably need at least one this transfer window as well. And that's if Palmer stays. We don't know how he is and how Brendan feels about him. So a lot to be done in this transfer window. And I think, I'm sorry if this has been covered, but you're looking at obviously a goalkeeper, centre-back, left-back, centre-mid, probably a striker and a winger. And they all need to be of very good quality as well as clearing the decks. So it's a big transfer window. It's not been that much happened so far. But we'll see how we get on.
What a transfer! What a substitution that was there. I drop out. Brian comes onto the pitch. Absolutely brilliant, mate. Well done, and thanks for coming on board and making some great points as well. Good on you.
Yeah, it's heredity. It's heredity. And Malcolm is a sub. It's heredity to make good points. So a bit of double whammy today.
And by the way, I hope your hair gets as much scrutiny as mine gets on here. By the way, I get a little bit of a flick, and honest to God, you should see the comments I'm getting. I notice you've got the wee quiff there as well. So,
to be fair, like the comments giveth and the comments taketh away, because one day I was on and they said, "Oh, Brian looks like Jamie Forrest's older brother," and I thought, well, Jamie Forrest's a good-looking boy. I'll take that every day. And then someone said, "Yeah, he's fat, brother." I went, "Cheers, lads, thanks."
I was going to say that's it. They knock you down. Great stuff. Well, listen, Brian, thanks for coming on board. And great, it's been great having Patrick on so far as well. We've got another 30 minutes at least to go, though Paddy keeps trying to convince me to, go against Paul John's rules and make this go on for an extra hour and a half, but I really can't today because in addition to doing this, I'm also heading across to Barrows Art and Design to meet with yet another guest. I'm filling in along with Acsom today for Paul John on that front. So we will have another Friday night show this week, another great guest. I'm not necessarily going to tell you who it is, but all I'm going to do is hint and say this is quite relevant. This is quite relevant this time. So hence the reason I'm dressed like this. So we'll see if anyone can guess about it. I'm sure Kev will let the cat out of the bag tomorrow. If anyone hasn't seen it, the latest episode of This Is Acsom featured Davy Elliott, who was a player signed, I think, by Davy Hay to Celtic in the 80s, and was given his debut, I believe, by Billy McNeil. Didn't play a huge amount of games for Celtic, but he was part of that late 80s, early 90s team. But what was fascinating, I think, about having Davy Elliott on was his ability to talk about youth development, the impact of not having a reserve league, things that we've spoken about, and actually with the observations of the Scotland team, with what was spoken about in terms of young guys getting chances within the Celtic team. It was great insight. So if you haven't watched that yet, get onto the YouTube channel and check it out. It's a really, really good discussion and just the latest of many. Hopefully we'll be able to do the most recent episodes justice with our guest this week. Moving back to the football then. So Patrick, we spoke about Kuhn there. Brian, you were talking about some of the various players and wingers, etc. There's another player that's actually been getting a bit of plaudits recently, and that's been Alistair Johnson for playing for Canada. Sadly, Canada's run in the tournament has came to an end. They were beaten 2-0 by Lionel Messi's Argentina, no less. So, as we said, I mean, if you're going to lose to an opponent, that's not a bad one to pick. But he's been getting a lot of plaudits out there for the way he's playing. Brian, given you've just joined, what do you think? Do you think that will help him kick on and really build on his good form into the season? Because he was one of the players that struggled a bit last year through injury, through trying to adapt to the system. He didn't really hit the heights that he had the previous season when he came in to replace Juranovic. But do you see him as someone that's kind of integral to our team going forward? Or do you think there's maybe better out there?
So I think, to your first point, I think international success is a bit of a double-edged sword for Celtic players, because what it does is it shows, scouts all over the world, actually this guy can play at a really high level against really tough opponents and do well. So that's always a wee bit of a worry. You kind of want him to do well, but no one to see it. Do you know what I mean? But in terms of him this season, I think he's pivotal because he was one of those players who you could tell Rodgers trusted completely. We've spoken about a lot, especially towards the latter half of the season. The team kind of picked itself, and you could tell it was guys that Rodgers knew, right, if we're up against it, and even if we're not playing well, these are the guys that I know will give their all. And I just think he seems to have got it since day one. Alistair Johnson, I love his attitude. He's a real warrior on the park. He loves the battle. He loves playing at the club. He's really embraced it. His personality really started to shine through as well, I think. So I think it's key we've got a bit of continuity, because if you're talking, there's so many players that are going to leave, whether that be first picks or squad players or whatever, and you're bringing in new players, you don't want to bring in 9 new players again.
Yeah. Probably
6 quality players, like I mentioned earlier, and then maybe a few loanies out. I think much more than that, you start to rock the boat, especially when you consider that Rodgers historically likes a trimmed squad. He likes a squad of like 23, 24, he says, and that's kind of it.
Yeah.
So I think he wants to keep that skeleton there and build on it. And that's the key thing, is building on what we have, which is what we didn't do before. We can't be in a position where we won a treble, sign 9 players and we're weaker. We can't do that again. We won a double. It wasn't the greatest performance of the season, but we still got a couple of trophies in the bag. But we know we need to strengthen on that, so we can't weaken as well at the same time selling any of the players, other than possibly Matt O'Reilly, who everyone seems to think is out the door.
Yeah, absolutely. Just bring a couple of comments up there. Danielle, really impressed with the throwing ability of AJ, which she's seen in international duty, much faster, much quicker, maybe getting back to that really quick distribution that we saw so effectively under Ange. So maybe, there's an opportunity for AJ to get involved more in the the throw-ins, and then Paul talking about AJ coming into form in the last 2 months of the season, which I think was pivotal, as you say, Brian. I think you make a really good point there about what we want to see in terms of recruitment. We had that 9-player rebuild almost, where we kind of almost knocked down the foundations of what we had before and started again. There wasn't really any need to. We were a successful side. And I think what Brendan's got to do now, and I guess the advantage of having a continuity of manager, is the fact that we have some really good foundations there. We've got AJ, we've got Carter Vickers. There is the possibility we might keep Matt O'Reilly. I don't want to lose hope. I want to continue to see Matt O'Reilly's granny on here, talking about how affectionate we are towards our grandson. I mean, that
was Matt O'Reilly's granny, you said there, yeah?
Matt O'Reilly's granny. Matt O'Reilly's granny,
yeah.
Yeah, the best. It's just that's what Matt O'Reilly does. But yeah, hopefully we get Matt's granny remains watching Acsom for a couple of years. Yeah, at least one more year would be fantastic. And we've still got one of the top strikers there, I think, in Kyogo. Captain's still there for a year or two yet. You would hope. So it's about bringing in players who just enrich and make better that side, and I think that's really important. Now, talking about former players, another ex-player that's been in the news recently is Carol Starfelt, and he's not really the smoothest time since he left the club to go to Celta Vigo. I think he dropped out the starting lineup, due to the bad form. Rafa Benitez, who was a manager at the time, was sacked. I think he did come in the last few games, and they managed to avoid relegation, if my research is right. He's a strange one because there are some in his support that really... He's a divisive player. He was a divisive player when he was with us. He's a player that a lot of people in his support look back on more fondly, I think, now than they did when he was at the club, to be fair. I mean, he was always a player that was under a bit of scrutiny, and always seemed to be associated with having a little bit of a mistake in him. But since last season, when obviously he's left, we've brought in Scales, who himself is a bit of a divisive figure. A lot of people now go back to Starfelt as a comparison for Scales and say, well, look what we had with Starfelt. Now, he may be an improvement on Scales, but are we in danger of looking at this player with kind of green-tinted specs? And is he a player, Patrick, that you think would be welcome back at the club, or would that be seen as a bit of a backward step, should the opportunity become available?
I don't think it would be a backward step, because I think, we've seen over the last 12, 18 months that he's definitely a better player than Scales. We've seen a reduction in quality, I think, since Scales has effectively replaced him in the side. I wasn't a massive Starfelt fan, but, I think he only really got better and better in a Celtic shirt, and, I didn't think he was a massive loss, but to break up that partnership, I think it was the partnership more than anything that people loved, and people seeing Starfelt, he'd a really bad start. His passing doesn't look crisp, but he won just about every header he went up for. He had that really good partnership. I don't think they lost a domestic game together, Starfelt and Carter Vickers. And people love the partnership and seen Starfelt as the weaker part of that partnership. And when he left for 4 or 5 million, you thought, right, well, he wasn't left-footed, but played on the left-hand side. So if we can get a guy who, a bit of a crisper passer, left-footed, and can win all those headers, you thought, right, we can actually improve upon this player. We didn't manage to do that. So to sort of reunite those two players, I don't think would be a bad thing. However, I'm not a great fan of people coming back. Obviously, Neil Lennon succeeded to an extent where, the first season he's back, he wins a treble. Second season, obviously, the COVID season, we all know what happens. Foster came back and done really well, I thought. Obviously, Bill Neil came back, done really well. Brendan, so far, has done really well. That's bad examples for the point I've just made, isn't it? Everyone's done really well, but when you look at maybe Mourinho at Chelsea, I just think players and managers returning to a club, it doesn't really.
Yeah.
It's never the same as the first time round. So as much as you could view it as like a 1-year break, he made a mistake and he's coming back, but I'm not a fan of going back, and I think it's we've seen it at the beginning of the window. Links with Tierney, links with Jota, links with Armstrong, all these ex-players coming back allegedly. I think it's Maybe, I've got no doubt he maybe is looking to leave Celta Vigo, but whether he comes back to Celtic, I think he'll be looking elsewhere, to be honest, and I don't think we'll really be looking at him. Obviously Brendan was happy to let him go for the fee that we brought him in for, so it doesn't scream to me that Brendan is a massive fan of him. So I think we'll be looking elsewhere, but great player, and I think he's one of these guys that we probably didn't realise what we had, in my opinion. I thought he was a good centre half, nothing exceptional, but you see what happens when you break up a partnership that done really well. You see what you miss sometimes, I think.
Absolutely. No, I think it's a fair point. And look, I get some of the views that it's maybe slightly lazy journalism. It's very mainstream media driven. We do always seem to get linked with ex-players, particular players who are maybe viewed as leaving earlier than the fans would have necessarily wanted. How many years have we been linked with Paddy Roberts? I mean, Paddy Roberts will be 54 and he'll still be getting linked with a return to Celtic at some stage. It seems to be just what the media does. But it was certainly a story that he was potentially available at the end of the season. I think the new manager of Vigo doesn't fancy him. He's 29 now. I don't think he'll be necessarily short of offers, but I agree with Patrick. I don't really see him as a player coming back. That said, if the media announced that Jota was coming back tomorrow, I'd probably be jumping for joy and get my Bumblebee top on and welcome him to the Brazen Head myself. But
that's the interesting thing. I don't. In terms of players coming back or things like that, that doesn't necessarily bother me because, as I say, if it's Jota, I'm taking him back. Yakimakis, probably take him back.
Controversial.
I don't really get not necessarily the love for Starfelt. He done well, but I remember the 2 seasons he was there, most of the conversation was we need an upgrade on Starfelt. And if you rewind the tapes and look back, almost everybody said Starfelt's decent, but we need better. We need someone Carter Vickers like.
Yeah.
And then we get Scales. Now Scales has done okay for him, but he's like Ralston, he's got a ceiling. And we're talking now about we get Starfelt back, and it's like, but then you still need an upgrade anyway. You need an upgrade at a time. And I accused of hammering Starfelt, and I didn't quite liked him, but people used to throw that thing about where they say, well, him and Carter Vickers were undefeated as a partnership. You go, yeah, but he was often defeated when Carter Vickers wasn't there. So the common denominator isn't Starfelt, it's Carter Vickers.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think, it's not that Starfelt's a bad player, but I just don't see why we would go back. It just feels like we need an upgrade anyway. And then I think Brendan likes the balance with the left footer, the left centre back as well, which Starfelt never looked that comfortable in. Yeah. So, yeah, necessarily players coming back, I don't mind. It depends on the player, but Starfelt, I just don't see. It screams a complete lack of ambition for me.
Yeah.
Whereas I want to, be a hypocrite because maybe like a Stuart Armstrong, I can see a better argument for, just purely because he thrived under Rodgers at first. Very experienced. He'd be a free transfer, almost an Aramoy type, no risk signing. But something that's going to take you forward, but something that just helps you steady the ship or helps some of the younger guys come through. So there's a rationale for that I just can't see with a Carol Starfelt.
It's interesting. The guy spoke yesterday about, in Lawrence's particular role, I don't necessarily know if the targets were mentioned yesterday. I think it was Shaqiri and Memphis Depay are really within our reach. But what the point where I think it did have merit was looking at that free transfer market and looking at a player maybe who is getting towards that later stage of his career, but could come in and do that Aaron White type role. Someone who can make an impact, even if it's just domestically or for some of the Champions League games to steady the ship. One of the things we seem to struggle with is when we win a goal up in the last season at certain times, we couldn't seem to maintain that lead. Our game management was really poor. And I think that's maybe an area where you look at more experienced players possibly available on a free. Maybe Armstrong's one of them, although, traditionally more attacking. But you're looking for someone who's got that football and intelligence, experience, game management, someone that can kind of, do the opposite of what, say, Yang did last year in a game against Rangers, where he just didn't read the situation and wasn't, capable of reading the situation. And he got hammered for it, maybe a little bit over the top. But I think if you bring in experience, you mitigate that risk. You bring someone in to say, okay, look, guys, we've got 10 minutes to go. We're a goal up here. We're a wee bit under the cosh. Go in there, sort them out, get their heads in the game and get us over the line. Doesn't happen too often domestically, but I think as we go into this new Champions League format, those occasions are going to get more and more frequent where we need people that can close games out. Moving on then to another player that's been linked, and I appreciate there's some speculation around this, and most of the players we talk about. Look, the fact is that we're not getting a lot from the club at the moment, so we're trying to use the sources we have to talk about players linked. So stick with us, and hopefully we'll be there when we get the signing. If Kev gets the signing later this week, I'm not going to be happy. That's not fair. But another player we've been linked with, and it goes back to Patrick's point about the number of wingers we've constantly been linked with. We seem to sign like there's no tomorrow. I don't really want to get in a position where Brendan's talking about Schwed saying, what have we got, 3,000 wingers here, who is this guy, never seen him before. But as a young boy, Andy Rojas, Costa Rica player, has been playing internationally. Now, he's 18 years old, which throws up a few red flags. He's spoken about wanting to play in Europe, which seems to be the traditional thing when a player's looking for a move. The fee has been speculated to be around about 800,000. Now he's looks, from what I see, and you've got the usual YouTube highlights package and all that sort of stuff, which is made Tilly look like Pelé. So I'm not going to read too much into that. But a lot of people are saying this is a no-brainer signing. It's 800 grand, get him in. He's 18, looks good, but does that not then fall into the model that everybody's been criticising? It's a project player. It's a player to be developed. It's not someone that's going to come in and set the heather on fire. Would that be a lower risk signing, for example, guys, if we had some big signings in, like the goalkeeper, maybe Idan Bernardo, maybe one and other? Would we then feel a bit more comfortable about looking at like an 18-year-old? But if we sign an 18-year-old as our first season, is that just going to get the fans' backs up again? Brian, I'll put that to you first, mate.
I think it depends on the 18-year-old. We saw a 16-year-old score an absolute blinder.
We did, and I've rung his agent, Brian, and he's not answering my calls.
No. So I think it depends on the player, right? I mean, this boy Rojas may be, able to start and be a starter. Just because he's young doesn't necessarily make him a project player. Yeah. I think that we need to be a bit more open about it. Now, if we sign 4 18-year-olds nobody's ever heard of, and that's it, then you get concerned. But I think you need to take each player in isolation, because the thing is, right, like, experience is great and you understand it, but Shane Duffy had loads of experience, Laxalt had loads of experience, some of these players, Barkas had loads of experience, Ayeti. I mean, just because you necessarily got experience, you still need to be the right fit for the club. So I do think we need experienced players, as long as they're the right players in the right system, in the right area. And sometimes in an attacking sense, sometimes it's better to have that sort of youthful exuberance where they just go and do stuff. They're sort of unrestricted by that sort of rigid system. I think Matt O'Reilly's thrived this season because Rodgers although he's got a strict system, within that the players have got their own identity to kind of do, what they like, essentially use their instincts and use their creativity. And I think that's why O'Reilly's thrived a bit more than he did under Ange. Great under Ange, but he's been exceptional last season. Funnily enough, I think it's the opposite with Kyogo. I think Kyogo really thrived in the system, whereas sometimes when it's not as rigid, it's a wee bit more difficult for him. So you may get, this guy coming in, might be 18, might have lots of flair, might be really exciting to watch, and might just have that creativity, that unpredictability that Rodgers wants in a winger. We simply don't know. So I think we need to take each player on merit and decide for there.
Yeah, I think that's fair. Some really good points there. To be honest, I'm going to bring up a couple of comments just in relation to that. So I think Stephen Kennedy makes a good point. Celtic fans, including myself, have been very patient. Now is the time for Celtic to announce signings 26 days to their opening league game against Kilmarnock. I would agree. I think the countdown is on. I think we need to see some sort of movement, I would expect, before we go to the US. Otherwise, I think the trepidation will turn into full-blown anxiety amongst the support. So I would agree with that. Danielle comes back in. I think good point. We don't need another Telio this window. We should be looking at experience. I think, I would agree. I think we really do need experience. We want players who can come in and establish themselves very, very quickly. I think to Brian's point, don't have a problem bringing in younger players. Sometimes if you're young enough, you're good enough. We saw that with the 16-year-old playing for Spain last night. What a goal that boy scored. Looked assured. Great. I'd have him in the team, no problem. But I think you're right. What we don't want is a project player that we have to develop throughout the season, because we're not a club in a position where we can afford to spend a whole lot of time developing players who should be actually making an impact in the first team. So I think Danielle is on the money there. Hoopy67 comes in to say we can't be starting with the same front three as last season, surely. Yang, no good. Palma is okay when he decides to play. Yep, seems to be the common perception. Kuhn is okay, but hasn't shown much. Maybe this is a season for him to break out. And Dyson's the only one who gets pass marks from me. Well, I would say that he is probably at the moment the established player on the left, Maeda. What I would say is I think he needs some competition there, or certainly some backup, because I don't think we'll be fortunate enough to get through the season without either of our wingers getting injured or having to take some time out. So very important that we get someone in there that can support Dyson. And then last point here, just write your own story. I think we need to let go of some of the projects that have failed before we sign any more. Now, taking a guess there at who we're referring to, I think the one Danielle mentioned, Tilio, is probably one that I don't see him necessarily having a future there. Yang, for me, has a lot to do. Maybe still merits a loan move. I don't see him making necessarily a meaningful impact in the first team this season. Home, I think there's some promise. I think there's some promise with Home, potentially.
Needs to get Home. He can fill out a bit and get a bit stronger. I think there's a real player there.
Needs to fill out a lot, yeah. But
position.
What would you think, Brian? Would you put him out on loan?
Yeah, I think there is a player there. And actually, fun enough, talk about experience. He's young, but he's actually played quite a lot of games for. Yep. I think he made his debut at 17. So he's not an experienced player. I just think he needs to acclimatise. Almost Ryan Christie-esque. If you remember,
you took the words out of my mouth there. I was thinking Ryan Christie. Did we get him in playing that?
So if he can fill out a little bit, which may have happened over the summer, we don't know. But I think he needs that just little extra. But I do think there's a player there, and we're actually fairly light in midfield. So you may not want to loan him out. You may want to just keep him around just in case. Otherwise, you're going to buy somebody to replace him, probably.
Absolutely. Yep. No, totally agree. All right, guys. We're getting close to time, but a couple of things I want to throw out there. Obviously, we know our next game is tonight. We've then got, I think it was 10 days before the team flies out to the US. Me and Patrick, before you joined, Brian, were saying we'd like to see at least 2 signings, maybe 3 before we fly out. So we're thinking either Bernardo or the obvious candidates, given how heavily linked they've been, and it seems that moves are being made. Goalkeeping position, I think, is paramount. I think, if we get a goalkeeper in, it alleviates some of the concerns. But thinking beyond that US tour, we get to the point where we play Kilmarnock in August. What does good or what does acceptable look like at the time we play Kilmarnock in terms of signings? Now, we've spoken about the 3 players there, the goalkeeping position and then Ida and Bernardo. But is that enough to start the season? If we got that, and maybe we throw another element into that, and we've still got O'Reilly. Is that acceptable for the start of the season, or would that be viewed as we've not done a good enough job in the transfer window? Patrick, I'll throw that to you first, mate, just because then I'll bring Brian
in. I mean, if we still have O'Reilly on the 4th of August, I mean, it doesn't mean he won't leave. There would still be 4 weeks of the window left at that stage. If we can keep him, I would be very surprised. Because it's felt inevitable for the last 6-7 months, but it would be undoubtedly good news if we can keep him for another season or 2. I think we need a centre half. We're talking about a goalkeeper coming in and settling into the back 4 or the back 5 even. I think you need a centre half to come in and really settle that and cement that back 5. We're playing Kilmarnock on the 4th of August. I believe the first Champions League game could be the 6th of September. I think that's the earliest point we could play. I believe that's 69 days from now. It's roughly a month after Kilmarnock. So I would like to have a centre half in by Kilmarnock. A centre half, a goalkeeper, and then I think Ida will be done by then anyway. And then I think Bernardo might even depend on whether O'Reilly leaves or not. We might have made a decision to only sign him should O'Reilly go. Maybe it frees up funds as well. Not that we need to free up funds, but maybe there's some sort of discussion in the background there. So I'd like a goalkeeper and a centre half before Kilmarnock, and I think Ida will come in anyway. So that'd be my view. And, just touching on, I mentioned days there, 69 days until the Champions League, 139 days since Hart announced he was going to retire. So, quite a while we've had to identify a goalkeeper. And I think it's fair to say we're not going to sign any of the remaining goalkeepers at the Euros. So I think we should be free to start negotiating with whoever it is we've identified. So I'd like to think a goalkeeper will be imminent.
Do you think we spent a lot of those days though just begging Joe Hart not to go? Do you think there was a period there where we're just saying, please Joe, don't go, mate, don't go? No, I think you're right. I think we're running out of excuses in terms of the goalkeeping position. Of all the recruitment that should have been done, and I think you'd like to think the manager had several targets identified for various positions that he wanted to strengthen this season. So look, we don't know. There might be moves happening in the background, but we've spoken a lot on this show recently about the lack of transparency, the lack of providing any sort of information to the fans. So it is frustrating. It is worrying. We're not basing that on anything too irrational. It's the fact that we've had high expectations for the recruitment windows for the past couple of years, and they've really not lived up to those expectations. And I think that's why there's so much trepidation this time. So it would be good to see some statements of intent on that front. Brian, same question to you in terms of what you would view as acceptable for that start of the season.
Well, I think if we only signed, I think if we went to that Kilmarnock game, having only signed Bernardo and Ida, it'd be a complete and utter failure. It'd be a complete lack of planning. We've needed another left back for a couple of seasons. Even when Taylor was doing well, we needed another left back.
Yeah.
We get constantly targeted last season. A lot of these we dropped points because we conceded stupid goals. People are just putting balls on that left-hand side, the right-hand side rather, targeting left back, or putting balls over the top and into the back post behind Scales. We simply cannot lose the goalkeeper and continue with Scales and Taylor without any competition. We've got to have guys in that are good enough to replace them and they can compete against. I would actually rather sign a keeper, a centre-back and a left-back and then worry about either Bernardo in the forward line, because actually, if you look at the squad, if you got a real strong keeper, strong centre-half to partner Callum Vickers, strong left-back to compete with Taylor or replace him, the rest of the team, you still got McGregor, Hatate, O'Reilly, Kyogo, Dyson, Kuhn, Forrest. So it's still kind of all right. You can start the season like that as long as you're at the back. But if you start with that a weakened back five, there's a chance that AJ could get injured, or Carter Vickers could get injured, and you could have Ralston, Welsh, Scales, Taylor, and Scott Bain as your back five starting the season. That would be completely unacceptable, and it's no disrespect for the players, but that isn't good enough. And I remember I had a real go at Rodgers because when he came in at first, and he said, I'm going to assess the players, I'm going to assess the squad and see what we need. And everybody's sitting here, we're three donuts sitting in our house talking about football, and we're all going, Brendan, you need a left back. Brendan, you need a keeper. Brendan, you need a centre back. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. And then it went transfer window, and then January, I could get 11 players in, but I need good players. Right, all right. That came, we signed another winger. Okay, Brendan. Now we're in the middle of July nearly, and it's that thing, we could get players in, but want the right players. Well, we know where we need them. You must know where we need them. What are we doing here? And, to Patrick's point, when Joe Hart said he was leaving, they should have been going, right, we need to get a bunch of targets. Who are you happy with, Brendan? Let's look at making these moves. Maybe they have been. Maybe the guys, maybe the players, maybe the deals have been done, but it has to be announced after the Euros, after the holiday. We don't know. But if we go into that Kilmarnock game, we are weakened back five, it's not the way to start the season.
Yeah, no, I agree wholeheartedly. And not to end on that, slightly downer note.
Sorry, everybody. I turned up late. Wednesday. Sorry, folks.
I think the points are relevant. I think they're good points. I think they're well made. And I think it sums up how we're all feeling. There is a degree of frustration. I think there's a comment that came up, which I think does sum up to agree quite a lot of the support, and that we've got trust in the manager, but it's the process, maybe not necessarily being as pointed as the board, but it's a process that sits behind recruitment that we're not entirely confident in. I think that's a fair assessment. Look, Gentlemen, it's been a pleasure as always. The last 2 days actually hosting in the hot seat for someone you just can't imitate in Paul John. I hope he is enjoying whatever he's doing at the moment. I'm sure it's in some way, shape or form going to benefit Acsom in the long term. For the rest of the week, you will be joined by Kevin Graham, who will be stepping into the hot seat and thankfully giving me a break and I can stop taking my anxiety medicine. I am heading off to film the latest episode of This is Acsom at Barra's Art and Design, so please check out all the episodes which are available on YouTube and look out this Friday for the latest episode, which will be with, let's just say, a musical affiliate of Celtic Football Club and certainly one of my great heroes. And as I said, the jacket should be a clue, but I'm looking forward to it. Hopefully it's going to be a good one. All that remains for me to say is Patrick McGill, Brian Dignan came in half time but made that impact in the second half of the season. James Forrest in there came in and saved us at the end. No, guys, it's been an absolute pleasure. I appreciate you coming on. Everyone in the comments, thank you very, very much for going relatively gentle on me, but I think it's clear that I need to up my fashion sense and need to up my hairstyle, so I'll take that on board. Hope everyone has a great rest of the week. Hope everyone enjoys the match tonight, and just a wee question for people to think about. Would we, in the next 24 hours, would we welcome a sign-in at Celtic, or would we rather have England getting knocked out of the Euros? I'm just going to leave that there. This has been a Celtic State of Mind on a Wednesday. Hail, hail, everyone. Thank you.